I think one of the biggest challenges we all face as marketers in this space is there's this dynamic balance between what you can directly attribute to revenue and the reality of what is actually influencing people to pursue working with you and hiring your business. And unfortunately, we're in this interesting crossroads where we, as an industry, have spent the last 20 years convincing business owners and leaders that if you can't measure it, it's not real. And so there's this challenge that I think we're all facing right now of making sure that we are influencing people throughout all different stages of the buyer's journey and not just relying on a last click attribution, because that is really spreading a false narrative on what's driving value.
Today, I'm joined with Stuart Derman. He's the founder and CEO of RELLO, a clean energy marketing agency out of Salt Lake City, Utah. And we're going to be talking specifically about paid ads and how to leverage them as a local home service for businesses. So, Stuart, I'd love for you to take it away and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about your experience in clean energy.
Yeah, well, first off, thank you, Jacob, for having me on, and it's a pleasure to meet all of you today. My background in clean energy started about 9 years ago. I had worked in-house and agency side for a number of different companies over the years, and then found myself as head of marketing over at Blue Raven Solar. And when I joined Blue Raven, it was very apparent that the model that solar companies, specifically residential installers, use to build their businesses in no way seemed sustainable or logical based on my experiences working at companies in other industries. And so kind of rolled up my sleeves, built out kind of a new approach for driving demand for them. And since that experience, have worked with a significant number of solar installers and EPCs around the country, and kind of took that experience and eventually had enough consulting work, as most agencies start, and decided to build an agency around it. And so today we've got a 12-person team based out of Salt Lake City, and a few remote folks as well. But we primarily serve the clean energy space. That is kind of our core as an agency still. And we've kind of branched out into both kind of moving upstream from there into kind of the utility market, working with product and kind of manufacturing side of the industry. And then we also have some clients outside of clean energy as well. But yeah, it's a little bit about me and my background. Excited to dive into this.
Awesome. Thanks, Stuart. And I'd love to just kick it off too, since you mentioned you started on the residential side with installers and EPCs. But I think one thing that's kind of in our minds right now for this call is, what are like the key platforms when you're thinking about like paid search or paid social, or to essentially reach homeowners? Like, what are the platforms that people should be on?
Well, I think like with any marketing program, there really needs to be a mix of channels and tactics that are being used. The quickest path to showing direct attribution and revenue tied back to what you're doing from a paid standpoint, I do believe still very much paid search is the best way to do that. But is it the best way to build a sustainable and long-lasting business? I think it's a core element, but I don't think it's the end-all be-all of paid media. I think you need to have a mix of different channels. It really depends on your business specifically. I still find a lot of success with Meta, YouTube, and you know, there's a number of other platforms, obviously, but those are kind of the next phase beyond moving, you know, maximizing your paid search budgets. But making sure that there is a balance between top of funnel discovery and getting those conversions that ultimately are directly attributable back to revenue. There needs to be a balance between those two, and there needs to be a little bit more faith in the fact that we're driving value through all these different channels.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I really like the idea that you have to prove attribution as success. but you also need every facet of the funnel to have touch points to be successful. And it's kind of this push-pull situation we get going on. So I know we talked a bit about like, how do we define success? How do you elevate that success to like a leadership team? So let's say you're on this call, you're a residential solar installer, you're doing marketing. Like, how do you go to your leadership team and be like, this is working, even just past the end all leads of homeowners?
Yeah, so one of the first steps is showing initial interest. So, for example, from an attribution standpoint and tracking perspective, at its most superficial level, you're getting conversions of people filling out a form or calling, right? But getting those initial touch points earlier, how are people actually engaging with your site? How are they moving around through the content? Are they showing genuine interest? Or are they just bouncing quickly after their initial landing page? If we can show multiple touch points and show consistent journeys that people are taking throughout content, that's a great early indicator to show that we're actually building an audience of people who are engaging beyond just that initial landing page. And that's one of the things that we've used as kind of buy-in to show initial traction. But beyond that, once we have those audiences defined and we're starting to drive a significant number of individuals to the site, classic retargeting is a key component of that, right? Making sure that, hey, if we have that audience that is showing some level of interest, that we are staying in front of them, we're staying consistent, and also we're able to show value to them. I don't think that a lot of the traditional tactics like ebook downloads, for example, that stuff doesn't work like it used to. And so it's hard to necessarily capture an email. I think people are very skeptical of giving their contact information until they're ready to move forward. But where it really comes in is starting to see that branded search increasing. So if we see that as we're running these campaigns, that the volume of branded search is increasing along with that, that is a great indicator to be able to show that, hey, these campaigns are having a significant effect beyond just the direct conversions that we're receiving from our campaigns.
One thing that's come to mind and on my feed is talking about dwell time. And I think it's synonymous with like time on a website, a web page. The idea of like the click being the catch-all ultimate metric can be a bit, I think, misleading, because people can click and they can instantly leave. And it's like, how long are they actually spending when they're viewing the ad before they click? How much time are they spending on the website before they go to the next step is just as critical.
I think we also rely historically too much on people going to our site. As much as we want to control the full experience, we are moving into, and we really are in, a more clickless world, right? Where we can't necessarily always get people to our website to have this perfectly crafted experience that we've designed. People are more and more in the platforms where they want to be consuming information and content, and we have to meet consumers where they are, even if it's not as measurable and as ideal as we would like.
And I know this talk is heavily focused on the paid side, but since you're talking about clicks and the transition, how have you noticed this push of AI shift, how SEO is now, as I've heard online, less focused on the clicks on the top of the feed for the top 10 search results? How do you leverage that as on the organic side?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question, because we've seen a lot of changes, but not necessarily in the ways that some of the doomsday proponents of SEO talk about. Because we actually, frankly, we do a lot of SEO work still for our clients in addition to paid media work. And what we're finding is that very top of funnel content, the blog post on something just to capture someone's interest around the topic and get them to the site initially, that stuff is getting eaten at a crazy rate by AI. But those more commercial and transactional focused terms, people are still, at least for now, going to Google in significant amounts for those terms. And we haven't seen drops actually across our clients on those types of terms. It's been the very top of funnel content where we've seen that getting eaten. And at the same time, we're still, we're not necessarily seeing, and I don't think we're going to see traffic referral rates go anywhere close to what Google provided. So it is going to be more about how do we influence people top of funnel within LLMs. I think that's going to be critical, but understanding that at least for the time being, if we're not trying to figure out how do we get those core transactional and commercial terms to rank, I think we're missing a huge part of the market.
And I think this does lead well to the next piece. When we're looking at, obviously, the residential solar side, there's sadly a lot of skepticism with homeowners having a bad experience. This has been going on for a long time in the residential solar side. How do past installers kind of break through and rebuild that trust, whether through its organic or paid efforts?
I mean, whenever we talk to any new client, the first thing that we bring up to them is our job, our first and foremost job as an agency is to help you overcome consumer skepticism, because it's the thing that everyone in this space faces. And there's no quick fix, right? I think the way that you show and build trust is through consistent and reliable, clear education around what people are buying, explaining the pitfalls. Having a lot of our clients are willing to get vulnerable and talk about not just the advantages of getting a system through them, but also here are the things to be aware of. Here are the concerns. Here might be the pitfalls. Here's where the type of people whose situation may not fit nicely into this specific product offering. And being upfront about that and being willing to have hard conversations through your content with consumers is the quickest way to build that trust, because most people are not willing to put anything that could be considered a detractor. And I think we all know as marketers, it's our job now to show authenticity. That's what people want. They don't just want a faceless brand. They want people who are going to be real. And the challenge is if you're not willing to do that, you're just going to blend in with all of the brands that have broken that trust. And I don't think that there's a way. It doesn't matter how many reviews you have across every platform, you're not going to be able to build that trust back. So the key is investing heavily in trust building content and being willing to be vulnerable in your content, even if it's a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, I love that. And I really like that you emphasize consistent messaging. I think that ties really well with everyone in this room as marketers and communicators to advocate for the organic need for content if you have a content marketer, or the need for a paid media budget to consistently hit the right audience. I think it goes both hand in hand on the storytelling component, like you talked about, but also the technical side as well.
And it's important to note, I mean, I know that this conversation is primarily focused around paid media, but I think a good paid media strategy and a good SEO strategy tie into each other. And they shouldn't live in siloed teams. I think those teams need to be working together in order to have the right effect.
Okay, on to maybe some more of the potentially technical stuff. Stuart, curious to hear if you have like one or two paid media hacks this team could kind of have as a takeaway that you like to implement.
Yeah, there's a few that I think are important. Really, the first one I think depends heavily on market. We were all talking about weather jumping onto this call, but weather triggered campaigns I think are something that get overlooked. So we have certain markets where certain times of the year there's significant windstorms or power outages. There's forest fires. Like all of those different weather triggered events can kick off campaigns that are specifically targeted toward those environmental situations that can be major motivators in people pursuing say and wanting more energy resilience. It's very timely, and so that's an area where I think there's a lot of opportunity. The next one being and this might be a little bit more simplistic, but I think often gets overlooked, is impression share on search. There's certain densities of impression share that people need to hit, and oftentimes I think paid media budgets are something that are basically given to an agency or to a marketer rather than starting with, well, what impression share do we need to hit in order to be effective with the client? And if we can hit that impression share, we see significant improvements in campaign performance because we're showing up more consistently throughout the buyer's journey and the search process. And so if you're the one showing up consistently, there's a point where it hockey sticks and it gets exponentially more expensive. But if you're underbidding because someone else who's not tied back to that data is coming up with the budget, you could be missing really important gains in buying efficiency.
Yeah, both great points. Love that. Stuart, is there anything else you'd love to share with this group here on paid media or SEO or anything really that you feel would be valuable to the people on this call?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I think there's a lot of change happening in the industry. And I think as marketers, we're very much on the front lines of dealing with the effects of that right now. And, I think that while marketing can, in a lot of organizations, just be viewed as an expense, I think it's important for all of us to remember that we have more visibility into the unknowns and question marks in the market than many other parts of the businesses that we work with. And so I think right now, being a good marketer is more than just influencing the conversation and driving demand. I think it's important that we look at ourselves more in a strategic business intelligence sense. We have access to data and signals that can really help guide the direction of the businesses that we work with. And I think if we position ourselves that way, we carry significantly more strategic weight in a C-level conversation than we give ourselves credit. And so I think it's just an important thing for us to all keep in the back of our minds right now is as you're running campaigns, as you're building out content, we have so many tools at our disposal that are indispensable to the individuals making these critical decisions on where investment goes. And I just urge everyone on this call to be leveraging all of those tools and resources to just maximize the value that they're able to bring within their organizations.
Brilliant. Love it. Stuart, where can people go to learn more about RELLO?
Yeah, first of all, I'd love to connect with all of you on LinkedIn, but separately, relloagency.com is our primary domain. There's going to be some switches to that in the next few weeks, but relloagency.com is our primary domain.
Love it. Okay, Stuart, thank you so much. Glad to have you on, and
thank you.
appreciate it. Thanks so much.